Good morning, everyone. It's a packed house. I love it. I'm sorry to have my back to all of you fine people over here. A lot of people excited to hear about middle school career exploration, apparently. So thank you for joining us. I'm Julie Lammers. I'm the Executive Vice President of American Student Assistance. We are a national nonprofit aiming to change the way young people learn about careers and navigate to post-secondary education and career success. And so I'm excited to have this conversation today about how we are thinking about middle school and their opportunity to expose more young people in middle school to career experiences. With me today are Kathleen Mathers from Education Strategy Group and Stephanie Simpson from the Association of Middle Level Education. So a little bit of background on why this is an area of real interest to ASA. So we are really focused on how are we helping young people understand their own personal interests and goals at a much earlier age. I think fundamentally we think about the fact that we really ask kids about their future at only a few crucial times. Like, think about it for yourselves. When you were little, someone probably asked you, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you looked at them in paralyzing fear because all I know is a teacher and the veterinarian and maybe what my parents do. And then that question rises again, probably when you're a junior in high school, right? What do you want to do next? And you also look at someone in paralyzing fear because we haven't had this conversation since I was 5. So what we are trying to do at ASA is really start to ensure that young people are having conversations about who they are, what their interests are, how it aligns to long-term career goals at a much earlier age. We're not saying that anyone needs to pick what they want to be when they're in middle school. Let's be clear about that, right? But we do see that a lot of young people are foreclosing opportunities for themselves because they haven't experienced it by the end of middle school. It's a crucial time that Stephanie can attest to about really making decisions about your future, and that we're simply not giving young people enough exposure to those opportunities. So we launched an effort a number of years ago, 2 years ago now, with Education Strategy Group to understand what the landscape is when it comes to policy around career exploration in middle school, what states are doing to understand, to move policies forward and really instill that it's happening in middle schools throughout the country. And we've undertaken some efforts with the Association of Middle Level Education to make sure teachers have the kinds of supports that are needed. But we still have a long way to go to make sure that this is happening for all kids. It's really in a nascent stage in a lot of places. And I think what we're hearing loud and clear from kids is even when policies exist, they're not necessarily being translated well into what's happening in the classroom. So first of all, I'm going to start and ask my two guests to introduce themselves. And in your introduction, I'd love to hear what you wanted to be when you were in middle school, and if there was something that informed that decision. So Stephanie looks surprised by this conversation, so maybe I'll ask Kathleen first. Do you have an answer?
All right. I thought you were going to Stephanie. So Kathleen Mathers from Education Strategy Group. For those of you who are not familiar, we as a firm are about 12 years old. Economic mobility is sort of our North Star, not sort of, it absolutely is our North Star. And our belief is that if we can do a better job helping students navigate their way through our education and training systems and earn credentials that have value to personally fulfilling and financially rewarding careers, that's how we can drive economic mobility. So I think that mission is near and dear to my heart. If I think back to middle school, I think I wanted to be a veterinarian.
Did you have animals?
I had animals. That was the extent of my thinking, right? You gravitate towards those things that you know and you love and say, well, I could see myself doing this.
Yeah. That is the basics of most career exploration at this point. Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Simpson, the CEO of the Association for Middle Level Education. So we're the world's largest professional organization for middle schools. We have 35,000 member schools around the world, and we're just totally committed to kids aged 10 to 15. It doesn't matter what type of school or where they're learning. We just want to support the educators that are working with them every day. In middle school, I wanted to be an astronaut. I was a big fangirl of Sally Ride. So again, what you see and people that you can visualize yourself as. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I'm really happy with what I'm doing now.
Excellent. I also wanted to be a veterinarian because I had a puppy and I thought, I can just play with puppies all day. There's a lot more to it than that, apparently. So let's start, because the name of this conversation really is about listening to kids. And the research we did with Kathleen at ESG was founded on a number of focus groups we did with students to really understand what their experiences were. And so I'll just read some of the quotes that came out of this study. I would like to tell adults that maybe we should do something hands-on to explore the career and actually be in the career for a few days and experience what we would do with them to see if there's something we want to do. I think adults should focus more on career exploration instead of doing the same presentation over and over again. Yes, Lexi is absolutely correct. We don't really talk about careers and stuff in school very often. If we do, it's more like once in a while thing in school. I think I learn a lot more talking with people I know, like my family, than in school. And we know, particularly that last quote, how limiting that can be for young people that don't have access to social capital. And their only exposure to career is their community and the people in their families. So Kathleen, let's start with you and think about what we've learned from the research that was done. Could you give a little bit of understanding on what's happening from a policy perspective around career exploration in middle school?
Sure. We looked across all 50 states to get an understanding of do they have a vision for middle school career exploration? Do they have policy related to that? And are they building infrastructure? Those were kind of the three big pieces we took a look at. The good news is that across the board, the vast majority of states were lifting this up as a very clear priority and recognizing it's too late to start this work in high school. We really need to look at middle school, where student disconnection really begins in earnest, and start giving them reasons for the why that they're asking. Why do I need to be here? Why do I need to take these classes? Why? And so states, by and large, said this is a priority for us. By and large, they had a pretty strong vision for what they meant by middle school career exploration, and they were beginning to put early pieces in place. So we would describe it as sort of a nascent starting point from a policy perspective. They were beginning to name, here's our definition for middle school career exploration, here are the policies that we have to guide this work in a statewide rollout, beginning to put some resources together and some expectations, and in some cases, putting some associated training and development in place as well. And that's all indicative of kind of an early starting point in the field. So all very positive, and yet we recognize the road to go. In other words, when you start in that place and you're just initiating the work and you're trying to roll it out across the state, a lot of that work defaulted then to paper pencil activities. How many of you are in states where you have career interest inventories? It's one of the things you do with your kids, right? Or career and academic plans. So there were a lot of things from a policy perspective that they're beginning to roll out, but because they're trying to do it all at once, all at time across an entire state, it's landing in a set of paper pencil activities that lack the authenticity that our student learners tell us they want and need. Teachers, counselors, advisors, there tends not to be dedicated capacity for this work. So it's kind of who has the most capacity, who can we borrow, who's not stacked too high. We know they're all stacked too high, but who can really lead these kinds of exercises, and is there a little bit of training and development we can put towards that as well? Also very, very early on the data side of things in terms of collecting information about where is this work happening across my state. How many students are participating? What is the impact to them? Is there any reporting that they're doing? Is there any data they're collecting that allows them to reflect on policy and practice and say, where do we go next? What changes do we need to make? And the last category I would lift up is around partnerships. That, as we all know, if you really want to move ambitiously in a direction with impact, our state agencies can't do that work alone. There has to be a whole ecosystem around them that's aligning and saying, this is important, we believe in this, we support this, we will be champions of this work, we'll go arm in arm with you to help with this work. And that ecosystem, that infrastructure was also in a very, very nascent place. There were very few state education agencies that could name a partner with whom they had worked closely on this. And so they felt like everything was kind of on their shoulders. How do we really define an agenda and roll it out with impact when we haven't provided the training, we don't have the full set of tools and resources, and our partners are not yet in a place where they can fully support our work? So really good starting work, an expected place for where they are now, but lots of opportunity to move forward.
Very positive, lots of opportunity. I love that. So, Stephanie, from a practitioner standpoint, you have made career connected learning a priority at AMLE. Can you just first of all talk about why it has become part of your mission in the last few years, and how receptive are teachers to beginning to build capacity, build training around these types of activities?
Yeah, I think career exploration, in my view, you kind of stole a word that we've been advocating for 50 years, which is the middle school model. It really is what middle school should be all about. Kids are supposed to be learning about themselves, their interests, realizing what future opportunities might be available to them, and then making a path towards that. So it really is, that's why we're all in on this, is that we really feel that it's not co-curricular, it is the curriculum of a middle school. So we're all in, but we see that there's a lot of work to be done in terms of implementation, because if you ask 10 middle school teachers or principals what good career exploration looks like, you're going to get 10 different answers that range from an annual career fair where we bring people in and then leave, to work-based learning. We're seeing some really innovative things around really getting kids out into the community, getting them to have project-based learning as a basis for their classes, interdisciplinary learning. So it's really about creating some standards and supports for teachers and framing it not as one more thing that we're adding to their plate, but instead, how does it solve a problem? So we know that classroom management is a big stressor for teachers right now, but we also know that by focusing on what kids are interested in and bringing them in and their perspective into the curriculum development, that we're going to be more likely to engage them, we're going to be more likely to have them want to be at school, and that solves a lot of our classroom management problems. So I think we need to do a better job of packaging what career exploration is in a way that's really, that makes sense for teachers and solves problems for them.
Where do you think the biggest gaps exist in getting us there? Is it a funding issue? Is it a training issue? Are there still concerns that this really isn't my job? Like this might be a school counselor's job, but it's not necessarily a classroom teacher's job.
Yeah, I think there's a couple pressures. If you ask a math teacher, they say, I already have way too much that I have to accomplish in a year, so where am I going to fit this into the curriculum? So there's some pressures there. And then also, we do an assessment for middle schools to help them identify where they're really hitting best practices and areas for growth. And invariably, community partnerships is a weakness for schools. So I think a lot of school administrators, they don't get a lot of training in how to build those partnerships that can make it a little easier, provide funding, get kids out into the community. So if we can do a better job of showing them what that looks like, and maybe from the state level, building some of those partnerships for them, I think that would be a huge source of support for schools.
That's great. Kathleen, I know we're now launching an effort to put some of this policy directly in practice in a number of states. Can you talk a little bit about this cohort model that we're launching in the next couple of months?
Absolutely. And I also want to tag team with Stephanie's response there too, in terms of where we are in this space. I think the intentions are noble across states to serve all kids. When you try to serve all kids at one time, and you don't have the capacity, the training, the resources, what you default to is every kid can do an interest inventory. Every
the
kid
minimum
can
level
right.
activity.
Because how do you get to everyone, right? And that's the right intention, all students, not some students, all.
As Lexi said, one presentation over and over again.
One presentation over, hopefully it's not one presentation over, but from a kid's perspective, it probably feels that way. It's like, oh, that's right. This is the time of the year where we do that inventory checklist thing again, and I check these things off, and the teacher collects it, and it goes somewhere. And then the next year,
we never see it again.
We come back and we do something very similar, and it feels repetitive. It doesn't feel like I'm learning. It doesn't feel like I'm experiencing, I'm exploring. And so with ASA's support, coming out of this body of research and recognizing there is such a huge opportunity, there's so much interest, there's so much momentum, there's so much commitment, how can we begin to help move this field forward? And so we have just recently begun to work with a group of states. We have, is it okay if I name them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Washington, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, believe Arkansas is coming in, who are all leading this space for a variety of reasons across those things we mentioned, their vision, their policy, their infrastructure. And if you put them together as a collection, they have a potential to be catalysts in this space. And so we are working with them across the next year, essentially on both sort of an internal and an external perspective. Internally, more state-facing for them, helping them build their partnerships, their ecosystem, their plan to strengthen their own work for having greater impact. But also for the field writ large, we are bringing those states together to do a couple of different things. Number one, try to spark agreement among them in terms of what would a model policy set look like in this space? Can we get these leading states to agree on that? Number two, can we use that and all of the resources they've created and we've created and put them in a repository that is publicly accessible so that all these states across the country who are saying, I want to do this, I don't have the time, I don't know how to build these tools, here you go, this is free. This is work, emerging best practice that is already underway. You can use these resources, we'll support you in that. And the third piece is the heaviest lift. We are trying to get them to come to a joint commitment statement that as a collection of leading states, they can agree on what matters most in middle school career exploration, what is their vision, what is their commitment, so that as a block of states, we then have a half dozen states who are marching in the same direction at the same pace and saying these are the things that matter most, and hopefully, hey, you other states, come along with us, and we'll try to together move the field forward.
That's the goal for this year. So, Kathleen, talk a little bit about some of the bright spots. What does this actually look like when states are doing it well, when it comes to either counseling or training supports or those types of activities? Funding, right? How they're braiding funding together to make this work really well. There were a couple of states that were doing some really innovative things. Can you just provide some examples of what that looks like?
I think one of the more groundbreaking pieces of work from a funding perspective has been the allowance of Perkins funds to be used for middle school. And so a number of states have already started to pull in that direction. Julie and I were just talking last night about some places that are creatively using their WIOA dollars to support this work as well. And there are states that are putting their state dollars at play. And in some of those cases, like in Pennsylvania, they're not only putting those state dollars at play, but they're putting the muscle of their accountability and public reporting systems behind it as well. So it kind of bookending that. This matters most. We're going to give you resources to be able to do it. And we're going to measure what you're doing and try to understand the impact of that work. So I think there's a lot happening in that space. In terms of, I think you asked the how, yeah. Right? I go back to the kids' voices over and over again. The kids were so clear about what they wanted. They want experience. They want to touch and feel and experience what these different opportunities are because kids are just like all of us. They know what they know. They know the people that they know the jobs those people have in some regards. They don't know them very well, but they don't know beyond that. And so kids were telling us over and over again, I hear about things like electrical engineering. I have no idea what an electrical engineer does. Can I shadow someone? Can I spend a couple hours at work with someone? Can we have guests come in and not just talk at us, but actually do activities with us related to what it is that they do at work? They need to understand, why do I have to take so much math and science if this is the job? And they need to be able to see themselves in that role in order to be inspired to kind of pursue that path and opportunity. I'll tell you just really quickly on a personal level. I have 3 daughters. They all think my job is horrible. They think it's boring. I've tried to explain it to them. They just tell me I can't understand why you would choose to do what you do. My oldest daughter is a junior in high school now, and after a long time of having these conversations, we've started doing college tours. And we sat down at one campus a couple weeks ago, and there was a student panel in front of her, near peer mentors, all of a sudden, right, appear up on the stage. And of the 3 kids, 2 were public policy majors. And my daughter literally leans over and says, that sounds really cool. What is public policy? And I said, that's my job. Right? But
you're cooler than you thought, Kathleen.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. But for too long, I've been talking at my kids and trying to explain what it is that I do, and I haven't given them that experience. It's the exact same thing for all of our middle school kids who really have genuine interest in learning what everyone in their lives does and what that feels like. And are they interested in it? Are they good at? So how do they start moving in that direction? What are the baby steps that we can start taking to move from paper pencil once a year into dosages of authentic experiences? It doesn't have to be putting every kid into an internship right away. It's the smaller steps that we can take in building up to that.
One of the largest challenges that we see in policy and in practice, it really is the ability to scale. So how are you thinking about the role that AI can have from either a practitioner standpoint or from a large-scale policy standpoint of helping these activities really scale? And similarly, how are we helping young people, maybe starting in middle school, really build the muscle of using AI as a tool that they will need in future career?
Yeah, I got to spend some time at the AI show, and that was really exciting to see all the new applications. I think we want to balance. Again, is it the career inventory? We sit them down in front of a screen when middle school kids are telling us, can we maybe take a little bit of a break from the screens? We'd like to play or do hands-on activities. So I think it's really a balance. It does help with some of the equity concerns because every kid can have access to that. They can explore careers that may not be available in their community. So there's huge potential, but I think, again, it's just a balancing act.
Yeah, and from the standpoint of helping them build those skills, how much do you see that conversation changing with the practitioners you are dealing with?
So I want to give middle school teachers credit. I feel like they were early adopters of AI, whereas we saw a lot of high school and college fear about cheating. I saw a lot of middle school teachers that were adopting it and thinking, how can I learn this so that I can, one, build my own capacity as a teacher, but also, teach kids how to use it responsibly. So I think we lean into the fact that if you're in the middle school teaching space, it's probably because you're, curious like a middle schooler. And I think we're going to see teachers building those skills together with students.
That's great.
But again, we have to listen to their voices. We have to listen to students in terms of how they're using it, how they're thinking about it, and how we can help them responsibly put some guidelines around that.
Kathleen, what are you seeing on the policy landscape as tools that are being rolled out to help scale these types of activities?
AI is right at the top of the list. I think from a statewide policy perspective, we're in the early stages of this. Everyone's trying to figure out how exactly do I harness this tremendous power that we've been given. I think if you think about serving an entire state from a middle school career exploration perspective, like I said before, if you spread yourselves too thinly, you end up with those sort of static activities that aren't leading to experiences. If we can begin to think about AI as a tool for systemic distribution of services, so what can we do within AI? Can we build in career profiles that all students can access? Can we build in descriptions of various types of jobs? Can we build in simulations of what it is these people do? Like really harnessing the capacity of AI for what should all kids get? And then we're reserving our personal capacity, our counselors, our advisors, our career coaches, whomever it is that is responsible for that kind of work. Then it frees them up to have those personalized conversations that differentiate student by student by student, right? Everyone got this, that's great. Now how do we dig in student by student and say, okay, but you're unique. What is it that you want to do? I see you said this, where are we going to go? And then how does that relate to the courses you want to take, the experiences you want to have, maybe the credentials you want to earn? All of those pieces. It's a both and I think we're really early in that, but I think there are a number of states really moving down that road.
Can I add to that I think that middle schools that have already adopted middle school model structures like advisory are already really well equipped to be able to do some of this work. We know that kids are successful in a variety of ways, social, emotionally, but academically as well, when they have a trusted adult in that school. So if we can have some of that work tied into, again, it's not co-curricular, it's curricular. It's how the school should be run to facilitate this type of work. So if we can tag in those people who are already building strong relationships with kids to also be responsible for this exploration, I think we'll be really successful.
Yeah, and I also, I would love to understand how we can use the kids' voices to actually drive some of that, right? How are they helping build these tools in a way that gives them what they're saying they want? So the landscape has changed significantly in the last few months. And I guess one of the questions I have is I get a little bit concerned about people slowing down, right? Not taking your foot off the gas a little bit on the issues that we care about, just to try to see where the landscape shakes out a little bit. How do you think we ensure that doesn't happen? Is it leaning in more on state work? Is it providing additional professional development and supports? Where should we prioritize in the next couple of months as things are rocky and that the priorities in school systems are really trying to sort themselves out?
I think unpredictable is a really good word. The amount of change and the type of change we're experiencing it feels unprecedented. If I were to lift up a glass half full philosophy, I would say states are going to get a whole lot more autonomy and be empowered perhaps more than they have previously. And what I mean by that is if we're shifting away from a federal policy structure that says all states must do X, Y, and Z, and we're allowing states to have a louder voice in that themselves, I would double down on states because they're in the position to make the kinds of decisions about what's going to matter most. What do I value? If I look across this K-12 experience here, what's going to matter most to kids? How am I really going to put them on a path to that personally fulfilling, financially rewarding career opportunity that we want for all of our kids? So I think they're in a unique position to think about this from the policy perspective, from the resource perspective, from the data perspective. It's always the last thing anyone wants to think about, but that's the power of this work. If we can find the right incentives, and incentives may be some of the things we're trying to put out there. What's the model policy set? What's the resource repository? How do we make change easier so that they don't feel like they have so much development work on their own shoulders? They can actually harness what's already been developed and use that in the course of moving their priorities into motion.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a lot more of these conversations at the district level, but also I'll continue with the glass half full. At AMLE, we've really had to contemplate, what do we mean by SEL? What do we mean by DEI? What do we mean by these words that are becoming problematic in terms of gaining funding or, in our communities? So we've had to think about and articulate, okay, when we talk about social emotional learning, we're really talking about equipping kids to be good people, to have the skills that they need to be successful as adults. And when you frame it like that, I know Castle's done a lot of workshopping, what words resonate with our communities. When you really describe it that way, everybody's behind these topics. When we talk about DEI and we reframe it as, well, we want to make sure every kid has access to the same opportunities. We want to make sure our community is behind our kids. Everybody, that resonates with everybody. So it's really caused us to be a little more conscientious with how we're describing the work we're doing.
So one of the tensions that I think we sometimes face in the career exploration is around allowing opportunities to expose kids to a variety of opportunities while helping them build skills, specific skills, right? Durable skills that will help them long term. How do you think about messaging that both of those things in the work that you do with teachers, that they're really doing both, right? But how do you talk about those durable skills versus the opportunity to explore widely so that we're not pigeonholing kids, we're not tracking kids at an earlier age, but we're really just opening the aperture to what's possible?
Yeah, again, I'd go back to student engagement. So we know that we call the middle school years the last best chance because it's when kids start thinking about dropping out, even though they might not do that until high school. It's when engagement drops precipitously in classrooms. But we also know from ASA's research that when you do a career intervention activity, that middle schoolers are more responsive than even high schoolers are. So we know that it's the opportune time for this. So again, I think it's reframing how we define career exploration. So it's not the annual career fair, but project-based learning very much is part of career exploration. So I think connecting the dots for teachers in terms of some of the the mechanisms they're already using in their classroom, and that can be a way of building those skills while also letting kids explore.
Kathleen, do you have thoughts?
Looked like you were going to ask something else.
No, I'm getting there.
I think that one word that hasn't come up in our conversation this morning is employers. and the role that employers have to have, the seat at the table that they need to have to help with the authenticness, if that's a word, of the experiences themselves. What we don't want to do is create more in a vacuum and do everything in a classroom set of activities. We need to have actual employers come in and be a part of this. And I think the employer voice is very powerful too, at helping develop those durable skills with reinforcement from the teachers, from the counselors, from the advisors on the problem-solving pieces, the critical thinking pieces, the collaboration pieces, those things that are going to remain constant even as our economy continues to evolve. And really focus down on those things. And I would hope to lift up that as we're getting more and more of these experiences and interacting with more and more employers, that we're also focusing on building student social capital. This is about network building. This is about expanding the range of people you know and what they do and that you can leverage in your own ways as you move along your own path. I'd hope to see all of those pieces in there.
So it's an interesting point, Kathleen, because we struggle often, particularly even in the high school space, with making the value proposition to employers that they should engage with a group of young people that won't be entering their workforce for quite a while. What is the value proposition for employers to engage with middle school, Stephanie?
I think get them in the school and it sells itself. I was just visiting a school in Hawaii, Evan Mackay Middle School, and they have an aviation program. The middle school kids are able to become certified in the aviation patrol or whatever they do for young people. The seats for their simulator were donated by Southwest Airlines. I think people really underestimate what middle schoolers are capable of. One of the things we've done for the last few years is a student sound-off contest. After COVID, we wanted to hear from them, what is the experience like as a middle schooler today? Because that doesn't compute for us. That's not the experience we had, obviously, as middle schoolers. And we gave them an open choice board. Submit however you want. There's no parameters. We gave you some guiding questions, but that was it. Kids were programming video games to help explain their experience. They were composing original music, recording podcasts, writing essays, making art. So I really think that when you just introduce our community, get them in the school, even if it's not necessarily, build that partnership over time, not just reaching out and saying, here's our ask immediately. It's just come to our school, see what we're working on, get to know our kids, and they'll do the job of selling it for you.
Yeah, that's great. So one of the most important aspects of this is, as you mentioned, the ability to build social capital is so crucial in career exploration activities, and it's often limited to certain populations of kids. And so it becomes a big equity challenge when we think about how are we ensuring that all young people have access to the same networks. When we know 50% of jobs still come through who you know, building social capital at a much earlier age is critically important. So is that a sort of crucial piece of the work that you talk to your teachers about? How are you introducing that social capital building aspect of the work?
Yeah, and this is what we focused on in our most recent partnership with ASA when we built out career exploration templates specifically for use by students. The activities aren't necessarily what you'd think they are. What does a network look like? What does my network look like personally and professionally? How could I build on that? Who do my parents know that I might be able to tap into? Who do I really resonate with at school? Who's my mentor and champion? So those templates were a lot more about kids getting to know themselves and what they had access to and how to build on that than it was about here's what a veterinarian does. So I think that specifically in middle school where we're talking about not tracking into a particular path, it needs to be very exploratory. We can give them a lot to play with in terms of how they recognize and start to build their own networks.
Yeah, and are we seeing much of that in the state policies reflected at all, that is a critical component?
No, but we're trying. I think that there is more and more acceptance about the role of social capital. I think as we move further down this road of pathways, there is a bigger understanding that knowledge, skills, credentials, the basic building blocks are absolutely important, but we're naive if we don't think that relationships are the door openers to opportunity. And so at ESG, we've actually worked in about a dozen places across the country. on social capital specifically and thinking about how do you bring this in, how do you introduce this idea, how do you help kids understand strong and weak ties, and that it's the weak ties that are the ones that really open the doors for you. It's such a deficit-oriented word for the positive outcome that comes from it. But helping raise that awareness, that understanding very early on, starting in middle school, perhaps even beyond, at not just getting to know people for the sake of what they can do for you, but getting to know a broad range of people and what they do and who they know and how that can become a part of your world. So as you're interested in doing something, you are able to pick up the phone and call someone or send an email or a text and say, I'd like to do such and such. We worked in a district a number of years ago at the high school level, and there was a high school teacher there who had found internships for all like 300 and something kids. And I said, how did you do this? And she said, I taught them networking. Well, these were kids from well-resourced backgrounds who had very broad networks already. And she said, that's the only way I was able to get them these experiences. So broaden that to how do we teach that very intentionally, part of the work in career exploration, part of the work with durable skills, so that we're helping kids expand their networks as they think about what they want to do and who can help them become that.
And don't assume that they have any of those skills. That, it's frustrating to hear a teacher say, oh, complain about what their emails from students look like. It's all in the subject line. It's in all caps. But did we sit down and was that part of our curriculum to teach them how to send a professional email? Did we teach them how to have a conversation with an adult, how to introduce themselves? So we have to make sure that we're explicitly teaching these skills.
Yeah, and how confident do you feel like teachers are in understanding their own social networks so that they can help young people tap into them? I feel like it's a skill build that we need for professionals as well, right? Yeah. Do you do any of that work with your teachers, or maybe that's the next project for us?
No, I think that's definitely. I think we'll hear teachers who, I haven't taught that because I don't know that.
Right.
But
I've only ever been a teacher. I don't know anyone outside.
I'm just a teacher is the most frustrating phrase ever. You're an expert, and I think that there's a little bit of fear of reaching out to the community because of the risk of rejection. But man, people want to partner with us. They want our kids to succeed. So put yourself out there, I think. Yeah.
So I know we're running up on time, so maybe we'll end with one final question. So ASA's goal is to make sure that every young person in middle school leaves middle school having had a career exploration activity of some kind, having been exposed to career in a way that allows them to understand themselves, their own personal goals, and then be able to take advantage of opportunities like work-based learning and other career-connected learning activities in high school so they can really chart their path forward. What do you think is one thing that needs to happen in the next 2 to 5 years, we'll say? Well, doesn't it need to be immediately to make that a reality?
That's a tough question. My general framing would be don't let perfect be the enemy of good. We're not going to get where we want to go overnight. And so as I said earlier, what are the small steps that we can take that will have the greatest impact? I go back to kind of our categories of what does your policy look like? How do we sharpen that piece up? What do your resources look like? Have we built things and can we build things that will lend themselves to authentic experiences? And are you measuring? What are the small steps you can take around measurement to understand the extent to which this work is happening and whether it's happening in an impactful way? Because that will drive all the changes right back to the policy, to the resources, to the training and development.
Yeah, I think, and this is part of the work you're doing, is just standardizing what good career exploration in the middle school years looks like. So we've been publishing for more than 40 years what the characteristics of a successful middle school are. I'd love to see something similar for career exploration in the middle grades. What are those characteristics? So a school leader can say, oh, it's not an annual career fair, it's XYZ, and here are some best case examples. I can go visit this school and see what's going on there. But to Kathleen's point, you have to start somewhere, start small.
Yeah, and I think it really is, how are we building those authentic experiences in a way that really elevate it beyond a paper and pencil exercise that we see as largely happening in policy, however well-intentioned, and really ensure that young people are having authentic experiences that they remember, right? And really helps them to drive understanding of themselves and their goals. So with that, thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to your panelists.